right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for January 28, 2015. First item on the agenda is a consideration of minutes for our regular meetings of November 20th, 2014 and December 18th. Those minutes are included with our agenda materials. Are there any corrections to those minutes? All right, if not, they stand approved as presented. And we'll now consider some new business. First, the sign variance requests. There we have application S15001 by Mr. Bradley Bork of Perry Engineering for Mr. Kevin Newell. He's requesting a variance from the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance that prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 307 North Thompson Lane. Ms. Kerr, if you review that for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. The applicant, Bradley Bork with Perry Engineering, representing Newellberg Holdings, TN LLC, Supreme Foods, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4, 24A22, the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over any public utility or drainage easements without the consent of the easement holder and the Board of Zoning Appeals approval. Sign location proposed is at 307 North Thompson Lane and is within the GDO1 overlay zone. The applicant is requesting permission to erect one push-through style internally illuminated freestanding wall sign with one 25 square foot logo sign and one 15 square foot changeable copy reader board sign and an overall height of 15 foot. The sign will be located within a 42 foot public utility and drainage easement. The agreement for a sign in a city easement for this location has been signed by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer, Murfreesboro Electric, the city engineer, and the Director of Building and Codes. A letter of approval has also been received from Atmos Energy and AT&T. CUD has no utilities at this location and therefore has no interest in this easement. Due to the sensitivity of the placement of the sign in regard to utility lines, the sign will be required to be located on site by a Tennessee registered engineer prior to permitting. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations, and Mr. Bradley Bork is available as well as myself to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? All right, Mr. Bork, anything you'd like to add?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Randy Harper with Perry Engineering as well. Mr. Bork's here also, but as Ms. Kerr had said, all the easement holders have signed off on the agreements. We made some minor modifications as we went through that process to address some comments from the Water and Sewer Department, as it's the sign location is in between their two utilities. They are satisfied with it, and we'd like to ask for your approval.
I guess not particularly relevant. Is this going to be Burger King?
I'm sorry?
What's going to be there?
It is a Burger King, yes, sir.
All right, any questions for Mr. Harper? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the sign variance request.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Bork, that application has been approved. We'll now move on to application S15002 by Mr. Nicholas Burnt for TT of GM Murfreesboro property, requesting a variance from the sign ordinance prohibiting a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 960 John R. Rice Boulevard. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. The applicant, Mr. Nicholas Burnt, representing TT of GMC Murfreesboro Property LLC for GMC of Murfreesboro, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4, 24A 22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a sign placed over or in a utility or drainage easement without the consent of an easement holder and BZA's approval. The sign location proposed is at 960 John Rice Boulevard and is within the Gateway District Overlay Zone 1. The applicant is requesting permission to erect one internally illuminated freestanding wall sign with 41 square foot of opaque background display area and an overall height of 16 feet. The sign will be located within a consolidated utility easement, water easement. An agreement for a sign and a CUD easement has been signed by CUD's project coordinator and the Director of Building and Codes. The agreement also requests that the required footing be located at least 10 foot from the existing water line, and due to the sensitivity of the placement of the footer in regards to the water line, the sign has to be located by an on-site Tennessee registered engineer or surveyor, and a form for that certification of sign placement has been provided, and the applicant will comply with all of their setbacks. I do not believe there is a representative for GMC available today, but I will be available to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? This sign meets all the other requirements, but for the fact that it's in
Yes,
or
sir.
over a public utility or drainage easement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I don't think we have a representative from the applicant, you said, but so then we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion we approve the sign variance.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Application has been granted. We'll now consider variance request. It's application Z15003 by Mr. Caleb Thorne for Reagan Smith Associates for Polestar Development. He's requesting a 10-foot variance from the ordinance that requires a minimum of 10 feet between buildings and parking or access drives on lots of 1.5 acres or more. And this pertains to property located in the commercial highway and gateway design overlay districts along the south side of Manson Pike and the west side of Fortress Boulevard. All right, Mr. Lewis, if you review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Mr. Caleb Thorne of Reagan Smith and Associates for Polestar Development is the applicant, and this is for a grocery store development located at the corner of Manson Pike and Fortress Boulevard. The subject property is a vacant lot and is zoned commercial highway with overlay classification of GDO1. And the lot is proposed to be developed with, like, say, a grocery anchor store that will include a fuel center. The plan was considered by the Planning Commission at the initial design review phase at the Planning Commission on December 17th of last year, and they didn't express any reservations about the applicant proceeding to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the request. In addition, the Planning Commission approved the final design review and the site plan review on January of this year, contingent upon the approval of the variance being requested by and approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Included in your agenda materials is a letter from the applicant, as well as a site plan and a landscape plan showing their proposal. I've included some photographs in your agenda materials of the surrounding properties for your reference. The site is actually, it's 5.82 acres, and it's bordered on both sides, one by Manson Pike and Fortress Boulevard. The adjacent property to the left is developing, is developing with a multifamily apartment complex, Integra Creek Apartments. And the building will be 43,841 square feet in size and will have a 740 square foot fuel center also included on site. It will have a driveway access onto Manson Pike and Fortress Boulevard. Because the lot is greater than 1.5 acres, the building must be separated from the parking lot and/or access drive by a minimum of 10 feet. The building is adjacent to the proposed drive, which is necessitating a request for the total 10-foot variance. In his letter, the applicant.
Mr. Lewis, somehow the wrong photograph has gotten up there.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that. There we go. One more. Good. Okay. See if that'll. Okay, this is a site located where this proposal is being requested. Like I say, the apartments are located to the west of the property. To the south and the west is some more apartments, and there's going to be a Sonic. There's a Sonic under construction already. In his letter to the board, the applicant notes that the proposed grocery anchor wants to include the drive-through pharmacy that will require a limited distance in horizontal spacing for a section of the proposed building in order to achieve this concept. This location can be found on a portion of the building that fronts on Manson Pike. Let me scroll down here to a little bit to show you the site plan. The highlighted area on the right here. The highlighted area on the TV monitor is the area that we're talking about with the drive-through pharmacy. The variance will be requested for a large portion of the building, which will encompass about 2/3 of approximately 120 linear feet of the wall length. The applicants feel that this is the drive-through atmosphere couldn't be accomplished without requesting the variance. The applicant, Mr. Thorne, is in attendance in the audience, and I'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any questions for Mr. Lewis? So to kind of get overview, this property is going to be developed as a grocery store, shopping center type area. They want to include a pharmacy, drive-through pharmacy.
Right.
And the pharmacy is necessitating the need for
that
the
variance, the drive-through pharmacy.
Okay. If the variance is granted, is there any possibility that they could use that variance to restrict the distance between parking and the building in any other location?
As shown on the site plan, no.
Okay.
It's just for the drive-through window. All the parking is it meets our requirements.
Okay. Okay. So this application and any approval would be solely limited to the drive-through.
Right.
For drive-through pharmacy.
Right. And there's a landscape plan in your set of plans that also shows additional landscaping that will offset the lack of landscaping right against the building. It's going to be between the drive-through access and I think the parking. Let me pull that up on here. Okay, on this particular screen that shows the drive-through window in the landscaping. That'll also provide a buffer. Let me see if I can get my little. Here's the drive-through window here, and the landscaping here will be in between the building itself and in the property line.
And this plan's been through the Planning Commission, been approved through the Planning Commission, and this is the only expected variance that would be required on the property?
That's correct.
And there's no need for a variance with regard to a fuel center?
No.
What's the name of this grocery store?
I believe this is going to be the Walmart grocery store.
Okay,
It's not going to be a multi-tenant operation. It's just going to be a one-tenant operation with a fuel center.
all right. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Thorne, anything you'd like to add to the application?
Good afternoon, Caleb Thorne, Raymond Smith and Associates, 315 Woodland Street. I believe Mr. Lewis outlined it pretty well. It's a freestanding grocery anchor tenant that's going to have a fuel center, pharmacy concept, and meats and vegetables within it. Approximately 43,000 square foot, located in the northwest quadrant of Manson and Fortress Boulevard. Being that it's located in the GDO overlay, the horizontal separation from the building is a requirement, and to maintain the pharmacy concept that's been set as the prototype of this user, the variance we feel is needed for that to occur.
Any questions for Mr. Thorne? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussions or motion.
If there's no discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve. I look at this similar as to us approving Starbucks that was on Medical Center Parkway, and then also Culver's that was on Medical Center Parkway. Make a motion we approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion to that? Also, I think we approved some tire stores too.
Yeah, we did.
That need the same requirement. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That application has been approved. All right. Next, we'll consider application Z15004. By Mr. Ken Crowder for T-Square Engineering. Did I miss one?
I'm sorry?
I thought you were saying I missed one or something.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Okay. Sorry. Hearing things. For McDonald's Corporation, and Mr. Crowder is requesting a 10-foot variance from the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance that requires a minimum of 10 feet between buildings and parking or access drives on lots of 1.5 acres or more. And this request pertains to property located in the mixed-use and gateway design overlay district zones along the north side of Medical Center Parkway and along the east side of Gresham Park Drive. All right, Mr. Lewis, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Sure, Chairman Rogers. This is the vacant property which is located on the north side of Medical Center Parkway and on the east side of Gresham Park Drive. You're correct in saying it's the MU. I typed in commercial highway in the text, but it's actually MU. And also it's got the GDO 1 Gateway Design Overlay District attached to this. The lot is proposed to be developed with a McDonald's fast food restaurant. The plan was considered by the Planning Commission for the initial design review at the December 17th, 2014 meeting. Again, they didn't express any reservations about accepting the applicant proceeding to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the variance request. Included in your agenda materials is a letter from the applicant as well as a site plan and a landscape plan that shows the intentions of the property. Like I say, the lot itself is a little over 1.5 acres, and it's bordered on by public streets on two sides, which is Medical Center Parkway and Gresham Park Drive. It will not have direct access to either one of them, but it'll have access to both private drives that'll be constructed with the development of the property. The adjacent property to the west of this property is across Gresham Park, and it's the Thornton's Convenience Market. And the property directly across Medical Center Parkway is developed with a bank. On the north side and the east side, they're both of it's currently undeveloped. The proposed building will be 4,789 square feet in size and will have a drive-through window. Because the lot is greater than 1.5 acres, the building must be separated from the parking lot and/or access drive by a minimum of 10 feet. The building is adjacent to the proposed drive-through lane, which is necessitating a request for this total 10-foot variance. In the letter to the board, he's discussing his reasons for the variance. He notes that the west side of the proposed building is 103 feet from front to rear, and the variance has been requested along that side of the building in order to avoid major issues with traffic circulation in and around the building at the cashier and pickup windows. Fast food restaurants incorporating a drive-through window need a drive-through lane adjacent to the building to accept payment and delivery of food to the customers. The ability to comply with the zoning ordinance distance requirement between the building and the parking and/or access drive becomes impossible without this type of variance. So the drive-through lane will be screened also from the other travel drive with a 5-foot wide landscape strip separating the travel lane from the drive-through lane on that side of the building. Mr. Crowder is in attendance at the meeting, and he'll be able to answer any questions that the board may have, and I'll also be here available to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Any questions for Mr. Lewis? All right. Mr. Crowder, anything you'd like to add to the application?
The only thing I would like to say is that your letter that I sent in says that we were looking for a 7-foot variance, but I read the GDO regulations wrong, and so Mr. Blomley gave me a call, and we are seeking a 10-foot variance on that side. That's the only thing I have to add.
Gotcha. All right. Any questions for Mr. Crowder? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion we approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Crowder, that application has been approved. Yes, sir. And our last application is a special use permit amendment request from Dr. Michael Hine for Redeemer Classical Academy. He's requesting to amend the special use permits that were approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals in July 2013 and January 2014. The special use permits established an institutional group assembly use, which would be a private school in an RS-10 zone. This property is located at 1503 Sulphur Springs Road. The approval of both special use permits was conditioned upon the requirement that all portable classroom buildings must be removed from the property no later than July 31, 2015. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the special use permit for a 5-year extension to this deadline in order to allow the portable classroom buildings to remain on site until July 31, 2020. All right. I think Mr. Blom is going to review this one for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Trying to keep you on your toes this month.
Yeah.
So good afternoon,
Like a
Chairman
tennis
Rogers.
match, looking back and forth.
Well, good afternoon, Board. And as you mentioned, this is a special use permit amendment request for property that you've seen before you located at 1503 Sulphur Springs Road. That property is located at the northwest corner of the intersection of Sulphur Springs Road and Myers Drive. Property is zoned RS-10. Institutional group assembly uses are permitted in the RS-10 zone by special use permit only. The site was developed as a church facility In 1998, the church that was occupying the building at that time, just to go over a little bit of history with you before we get into the actual request, in 1998, the church that was in that facility at that time requested a special use permit for the placement of four portable classroom buildings on a temporary basis, and it was represented to the board at that time that they would be there for approximately 3 years. So depending on when they were placed on the property, that would have been around 2001 or 2002, in which they would have been required to have been removed. They never were removed, and then in 2006, the planning staff made contact with the then pastor of the church and put him on notice that the portables were in violation. During the course of the next several years, the planning staff worked with the church to try to bring the site into compliance. That particular church ended up relocating, and a new church purchased the property, but does not actually operate its church operation inside the building. But the new owner was put on notice about the violation as well, and subsequently, the new owner entered into a lease with Redeemer Classical Academy to occupy the portables to operate a private school on the property. So Redeemer Classical Academy, along with Victory Christian Center, who is the owner of the property, made application in July of 2013 for a special use permit in order to operate an institutional group assembly use or a private school on the property. Now, the church building is leased to another church who does operate a church inside of that building, and Redeemer primarily occupies the portable classroom buildings and a small amount of office space inside the main building. But primarily the main building on the property is occupied by the church that is leasing the property. In July 2013, the board approved Redeemer Classical Academy for the special use permit to occupy the property as a private school in the RS10 zone with the following conditions: that all portable classroom buildings must be removed from the property no later than July 31st, 2015. Number two, that the maximum number of students allowed to be enrolled at the school is 65. If the school desires to have a greater number of students, then it must apply to the BZA to amend the special use permit, and a traffic study will be required at that time. And number three, no staging or queuing of school traffic will be allowed on either Myers Drive or Sulphur Springs Road. Since that time, the school has operated there and has not exceeded the 65 students, and nor are they requesting to exceed that 65 students. They indicated to the board at that time and at a subsequent meeting that they would endeavor in the 2 years that they would be occupying this property to try to find a suitable replacement permanent location to relocate to. And in their letter to the board that's been included in your agenda materials, they have outlined a number of steps that they have taken since July 2013 to try to find a suitable site to relocate to. So they have been working diligently on finding a replacement site, but have for one reason or another not been able to secure a replacement site. In January of 2014, so a year ago, Redeemer Classical Academy determined that a fourth portable may be required. So they made application to the board for a special use permit a year ago for a fourth portable. That fourth portable was approved with the same conditions of approval that the original special use permit was approved with. That fourth portable to this point has not been needed, so they have not placed that portable out there. And they have been operating within the confines of those three existing portables. But that fourth portable, if it were to be placed out there, was required to be removed by July 31st, 2015 as well. Which brings us to the present time. The applicants, as I mentioned, have been looking for a replacement site, but with no luck so far. And as I mentioned, they have outlined what they have done up until this point to give you some idea of how they got to this point. And they have indicated in their letter that if the extension that they're asking for this month is not approved, they will have to cease operations of the school because they have nowhere to go. The special use permit amendment to the two special use permits, the July 2013 and the January 2014, it's simple. They're asking for one amendment to those to the conditions that were placed upon those special use permits, and that is a time extension for the portables to remain on site until July 31st, 2020. That would give them an extra 5 years in order to find a replacement site. The applicants have indicated that the operation of the school will not change, that the hours will remain the same, and the way that in which they use the facilities will remain the same. They are still, the special use permit amendment does apply to the January 2014 special use permit, so they do want to be able to reserve the right to bring that fourth portable in for the duration of that 5 years if they determine that it is necessary. And I don't believe that they know at this point whether that would be necessary, but if they do need it, they wish to have that ability to do so. Staff, if the board approves this special use permit amendment request, staff recommends that the same conditions be placed upon this request that were placed on the previous two special use permits. The only change would be the date that the portables must be removed from the property, and that would change to July 31st, 2020 instead of the July 31st, 2020 instead of the July 31st, 2015. The same conditions as staff is recommending to stay in place, that if they do exceed that magic number of 65, that they would have to come back to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit amendment with a traffic study. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Doug Howard, I believe, is the one who's going to, or Mr. Weatherford is going to speak about what the school has done in the interim in between its original approval and now, if you would allow him to address the board.
All right. Mr. Weatherford.
Thank you. You'll see in the letter several efforts the school and the board has put forth. First of all, to look at alternative sites, and also efforts that we think coincide with looking for a permanent alternative site to help to increase the financial strength and the viability of the school. Mentioned in the letter, some of the bullet points you see in your letter, we have looked at 4 different sites. We did make offers on 2 of those sites that were not accepted. As you might anticipate with a new nonprofit private school, it just takes time to be financially viable to qualify for financing for a permanent site. And it's important to the school, to the board members of the school, to have, realistically and from a perception standpoint, stability. And being in a situation where we have to move from one lease situation to another in anticipation of having a more permanent site in a 4 to 5, 6 year period of time, we feel like it's very important to the school, to the parents of the students, to have more permanency. And so we feel like this 5 year period of time would provide that, plus allow us to really get a lot of these efforts implemented, to go through capital campaigns, other fundraising campaigns, to be in a better position to qualify for either purchasing property or financing the purchase of property. And obviously, thinking about operating the school next year. This is important to us. I'm sure that was indicated in the letter. So anyway, but you did a great job, Mr. Blomley, in outlining everything. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Weatherford, I have one. What is your current lease agreement? Is it for a 5-year period, or is it a 1-year lease, or in reference to with the church?
It's actually with
or
technically the name of the church. Doug, Mr. Howard, you might help me with that. I think it is it not annually?
Right now, excuse me. Right now, we made the lease to be coterminous with the special use permit that you granted 2 years ago. So the lease will expire on July 31st, 2015. What we decided to do would be wait until we got the results from the board before we entered into negotiations for a new lease with the owner of the property.
So my next question would be, what do you anticipate that length of lease to be once you negotiate? I'm going to get to a point here in a minute. There's a reason why I'm asking this question, but what do you anticipate your negotiation process as to the length of time to the lease?
Assuming that we were granted the special use permit to go out to 2020, I think what we would try to do would be negotiate something along the lines of maybe a 5-year lease that would be coterminous with that, but then try to put some termination agreements within there, that if we saw where we were at a point where we were able to vacate from the premises and go to a new location, we could go ahead and exercise those termination rights and move at that point earlier.
Okay. And my point of the question is, and then I'll address this to Mr. Blomley, is if the board chose to approve this extension for 5 years and then you were put in a position based upon your lease agreement that you had to sublease this out for whatever length of time that you had left on this lease that you had signed, and your termination piece was not effective for a year or two with respects to that. If they were to sublease this, do we have the ability to say this is only specific to this applicant and having nothing to do with whom they may sublease this to?
I think that, and Mr. Ives can confirm this for me, I think that you could put a condition on there that, or kind of add on to that condition number 1, that all portable classroom buildings must be removed from the property no later than July 31st, 2020, or must be removed whenever the applicant vacates the property. Mr. Ives, would that be acceptable?
Yes, I believe it would.
Thank you.
And we would be perfectly fine with that as well.
And that would include whether it was sublet to someone else or if the owner just had the property and it was no longer leasing it to Redeemer Classical Academy.
As I understand the intent of that, it would be written so that when these folks vacate that, regardless of what happens, the portables would leave at that time. If I understood that, I mean, you could write it either way, but I believe that was the intent that I heard.
And if I may, then what we would try to do to I guess go hand in hand with that is that if that was placed as a restriction on the special use permit, then we would try to go ahead and write that somehow into the lease. That if, in other words, instead of if there was a termination a year away, but if we vacated the property, if the restriction was placed on it that the portables had to be removed when we vacated, then maybe we could write into the lease that the lease terminates at that point as well.
I foresee, just for the sole reason that Redeemer Classic has developed and why you're at the spot that you're at, that once Redeemer Classic leaves and the way this town is growing, that there's going to be a Redeemer Classic 2, I'll call it, that is going to be developed, and they might be looking for this site. And I think I'll speak for myself, I think we need to do all we can do as a board that this doesn't become continuous. And so even though you might be leaving this site, somebody else may want to use it for the same reason that you're using it today.
Ben, you mentioned that stability is kind of a factor in wanting to push it out 5 years, and and it's going to put us at 22 years that these portables are going to be sitting on this property. Have we, by setting a 2-year deadline when the application was first heard? Actually, I don't think we set that. I think it's something that you all set. Have you found that has been an impediment to, I guess, recruiting students to the school?
You're talking about a 2-year term?
Yes.
Being an impediment?
Yes.
From a perception standpoint, yes. It is very, well, I don't want to sit here and say that potential applicants have asked about how long we were going to necessarily be at that spot or how long we were approved, but we get enough feedback that the stability of location is an important part in the decision-making process for a parent. And again, it was just important for us that parents and students didn't move from one place to the next to the next. And particularly, we've spent a lot of money on, relative to our budget, to marketing dollars to make more folks aware of the school, and with potential parents and students, obviously looking at the school and the perceived viability of the school. Stability is just, from our standpoint and from certainly questions that we receive, it's just a very important part, very important aspect of operating the school.
So if we, instead of 5 years, did a 2-year extension, it would kind of be unhelpful to you, or maybe a net negative for you going forward?
That is our perception. Otherwise, we would not have asked for 5. Again, the school's been in existence a year and a half, and so that would have, it would have been in existence 2 years at the expiration of the current permit, and an additional 2 years would be 2.5 years from now. And again, as a banker, I kind of know it's just tough for a school that age to have accumulated what they need to in a 4-year period of time to be able to go to a permanent place. When I say permanent, from the standpoint of purchasing versus leasing. A school ideally needs to have ownership in a property, and so there's certainly some financial considerations and projections involved in that. To answer that question, if that makes sense.
How many students are you at now?
40.
40. Okay, so you still have room to expand. We approved 65.
That's
65?
correct. Yes.
Okay. Did you add the 4th portable? Is it there?
No.
It hasn't been added.
It is not. It's not added yet.
Okay.
What number of students do you anticipate needing the 4th portable? Is it a number of students thing?
Ms. King, that's somewhat difficult to answer because it depends on if you have a application for, say, 12 kindergarten students. They kind of need to be in a building by themselves. If we had 8 to 10 to 12 kindergarten students apply this next year, then we're going to need the portable. If you have, say, 15 new students applied, but they're dispersed throughout the grades, then we could potentially still have
Go
3.
without.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I'll start a conversation. I'll be the first one to say that, I think we tried our best to give a concrete timeline with respect to this application on the front end. And actually, I was reading some of the minutes with respects to when it was approved. I do understand that the position that y'all are in. I probably would, I'll be quite honest with you, I would not even think about extending this for a 5-year period of time if I felt like the school either had shown or would show, if that's the right term, a negative impact on the neighborhood. But needless to say, I don't think that's been the case, or we would have someone here speaking against it, or a lot of people know my phone number, and I have got 0 calls with respects to the fact of this application. So all that being said, my concern is, so you have a proven track record, I guess, in that 1.5-year period of time with respects to the impact on the neighborhood. So I'm of the opinion that we try this, we give this extension to give you all the ability to do what you need to do in that time frame. But I'm also of the opinion, and this may be a double standard, that we do not set the standard for the next party to be able to do the same thing. And so whatever motion is made today, if it is an approval, we want to make it clear that to the next applicant that that's not the purpose of this particular location, I guess. And I would hope that within the 5-year period of time, we're not seeing another, the third or fourth application with respects to this on behalf of Redeemer.
I was happy to hear Mr. Halliburton's question regarding whether this could be conditioned upon the applicant only. I completely agree, and I have. It's hard for me to swallow a portable being somewhere for 20 years, but I think ultimately this situation and the details of this situation make sense. And even though if there was any reason Redeemer left, I agree that I would think it would be appropriate for those portables to retire.
All right. I couldn't have said it any better what Ken said. I agree with him 100%. All right. Ready for a vote?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 5-year extension. And I don't know how this needs to be worded, but once once Redeemer Classic vacates this property, that at that point in time, this application or special use permit ends if it's within that 5-year period of time, and of course it would end at the approved date. But you look like you need to add something.
Well, I was just going to say I was scribbling down some notes when you were discussing the amended condition before.
Right.
And so what I was thinking was take the recommended condition number 1, and then after 2020 add, or when Redeemer Classical Academy vacates the property, comma, whichever comes first.
Okay, perfect.
So that way we're guaranteed of it not being any longer than July 31st, 2020, but possibly sooner than that if Redeemer vacates the property.
And your motion also includes the other conditions set by the staff?
Correct. Even though I didn't say that. But yes.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that application has been approved. If we gave out loyalty cards, I think you would be our first punch in the loyalty card. All right, last item is staff reports and other business. Any other business?
I don't have any.
Nothing? No.
I just want to thank Mr. Lewis for working so hard on this month's agenda and for the time that he spent preparing and doing a lot of the things that I normally do. So thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, job well done, and look forward to working with you for the next several months, however long it takes. All right.
As few as possible.
Few as possible. That's what I said. Got that on the record. All right, we're adjourned.